I'm not quite sure what Cuomo and AOC are thinking with this new proposed bill that targets the wealthy. They somehow imagine that all these wealthy business owners are just going to stick around while they get taxed out the wazoo, imagining that they're not going to flee to places like Florida or Texas as they decide to raise taxes. New York will be the highest state in the entire country with the highest tax rate. And they just imagine that that these wealthy individuals are just going to be like, oh, yeah, here, take my money. And imagine that they're just not going to get up and leave. It just overwhelmingly amazes me the level of incompetence that New York, in terms of being one of the wealthiest and of course one of the greatest cities for a long time, especially as a hub for business and travel, will be destroyed by the policies of these politicians. This came out today. It says the richest New York City residents could soon face the highest combined state and city taxes in the US. And so of course they're going to have the highest state. If you live in the city, if you actually live in Manhattan, you have to pay an extra tax for living in the city, on top of having what will be the highest state tax in the whole country, on top of how expensive it is to live here, on top of having to deal with restrictions in terms of closures. You've got closures, you've got passports being pushed, and these people just imagine that somehow these large business owners, or small business owners for that matter, or individuals who own real estate are just not going to up and leave. Makes absolutely no sense. Because Governor Andrew Cuomo and state lawmakers have reached a tentative agreement to raise taxes on the wealthy New Yorkers as part of a roughly $200 billion budget deal, expected to be announced as early as Monday, according to a person familiar with negotiations. If approved, state income tax rates would temporarily, or put that in quotes, be raised to 9.65 from 8.82 for single filers earning more than $1 million, according to the person who wasn't authorized to speak publicly because a final budget hasn't been reached. New York City residents with incomes over that threshold would pay between 13.5 and 14.8%. That compares with 13.3 on income over $1 million in California, currently the highest in the nation. Okay, so I guess Governor Cuomo is trying to compete with Governor Newsom, who can race their city to the bottom the fastest. As lawmakers were nearing a budget agreement that would increase corporate and income taxes by 14.3 billion a year. And again, this is primarily because of the incompetence of Governor Cuomo and the state lawmakers. They have absolutely no idea what they're doing. And so as a result of the numerous and prolonged closures that went on with many of the businesses that primarily impacted Black and Hispanic businesses, they're now trying, of course, to not tax the ones that are left over, imagining that this somehow is going to work out in their favor. So it goes on to say, here it says, here we go, 4.3 billion a year additional revenue going for who? To fund aids for schools, undocumented immigrants, and small businesses. So small businesses were overwhelmingly impacted as a result of the closures. And of course, who were the ones that mandated the closures? Why, it was the lawmakers, while allowing the large businesses to remain open, thereby, of course, impacting most of the small businesses. New York has had a huge amount of restaurants and small bars, etc., that have been closed down, especially with many of the apartment buildings where hundreds of thousands of people have left, taking, of course, their high-end paying jobs along with them. We've seen big companies like Goldman Sachs, as well as other banks and other institutions. And of course, we now have the New York Stock Exchange, as well as the NASDAQ, threatening to leave because New York, of course, is trying to tax them on each transaction. And they have stated already that if you go forward with this tax, that they will leave, of course, taking jobs and, of course, revenue along with them to places like Florida and Texas, making those places, of course, the new attraction for growing businesses. Why? Excuse me, because that's where the jobs are going to be. And so now you have all of these apartment buildings, or I should say all these buildings that are commercial real estate, where I believe only 24% of the people so far have come back to their office spaces, because people realize, these big businesses realize, you know what, we don't need all this office space. We can kind of have like a pseudo hybrid, or just maybe keep most people at home, because we really, why would I want to waste the expense when I'm getting the same or similar levels of productivity from individuals who are working from home? Why would I then go back to the office, commute, have to pay extra money, and have people to maintain it, dealing with the commute, parking, etc., crime, especially now with the big crime. So what they're trying to do is they're proposing for a lot of these buildings that were typically utilized for commercial real estate for office space, and they're like, well, let's convert them over into apartment buildings. But it's like, but if there are no jobs, who's going to live there, right? Doesn't make sense. You have to have the jobs first that will attract people to move, to then be able to rent an apartment. It doesn't work. It doesn't work the other way around. You don't create living space and then hope to find a job in a dying city. That doesn't work. It says the embattled governor, who faces multiple claims of sexual harassment allegations, his office covered up C-19 deaths, said on a call with reporters Monday that he has reached a conceptual agreement on all issues with the legislature. Cuomo called the deal the most complicated budget we've ever done. And in my opinion, and again, this is my opinion only, I do not think that Governor Cuomo put all of these elderly patients in those nursing homes under his own volition. I do not believe it one bit. Because this man has access to the top doctors, right? That he needs. Right? You have all these doctors that were on his team, and I highly doubt that any of those doctors would have recommended to him to say, hey, you've got all these patients with a novel virus that is known to be a respiratory disease that primarily will impact geriatric patients. Let's put all these patients in the nursing home. Let's put them back. That makes absolutely no sense. Now, of course, some people might think that maybe he did it just for political reasons, to make Trump look bad. I'm not sure that he's that stupid to do it on his own. In my opinion, I think he was actually coerced to do that. I don't really think that many of these individuals are really that sick and demented, but I do think that some of them maybe have people hanging over them that have a little bit more authority, that are flexing their muscles over them. And as a result, you see Governor Cuomo now being exposed as a result. Not because these Democrats didn't know what he was doing beforehand. It's just now maybe he's not playing along. Maybe he's making little threats to come forward with some information. And so then out of the woodwork, you have all these women, of course, that are now making accusations. But any other lawmaker, I think he's had 8 or 9 women who have come forward, would have been forced to step down by now. But you see the news, they really don't cover it. You don't really see like these left-wing CNN, etc. organizations really going in hard on him and making him look bad. You'll see it here and there, but you really don't see it being pushed. Like if it was, for example, maybe somebody on the far right, anybody who was like making a little bit too much noise that we needed to silence. Let's, basically come out against that individual, or maybe some sort of a Hollywood celebrity who was kind of exposing what's going on. So let's make them look bad. Like, for example, individuals like Bill Cosby, right? Bill Cosby is a good example. You've got the Harvey Weinsteins who, the women kind of come out of the woodwork out of nowhere. And of course, basically it's just a money grab. I really don't think that Governor Cuomo is that type of person. But again, that's just my opinion on the matter and just the way things are kind of playing out, right? It's just really interesting that things are coming out now. And like I said, with any other individual, they would have outed him a long time ago. But you now see New York being the first state doing the whole passport thing going on, right? The whole Excelsior program. And they were like, well, if you're not gonna play nice, right? Maybe there's going to be a couple of accusations come out. We want you to come out with this passport. This is what we want to do. The people are getting out of line. Not too many people are taking the vaccine. You've got people who maybe are like resistant to taking it. And we need someone to apply a little bit of pressure. And it's going to be you. And if you don't want to play ball, we've got a couple of people who've got a couple of accusations that they might come forward with. What you say? Anyway, going back. It says New York lawmakers are the latest officials target the wealthy in the wake of the economic devastation wrought by C-19. Of course, they blame it on C-19, even though it's primarily his fault for the decisions that he either made or was coerced to make based off of the information he had. It says that raised concerns that higher taxes could drive wealthy residents to places where they don't have to pay as much, such as Texas and Florida, threatening city and, of course, the state budgets. It says the pandemic has already seen a temporary migration of Americans out of New York and San Francisco and other big cities into second homes elsewhere. The New York business leaders such as Cuomo have warned that higher taxes on the wealthy could discourage workers from returning to the state after the pandemic is over and encourage companies to move out. And he said this before the pandemic, back when Amazon was looking to bring businesses. I believe it was in Queens and Astoria. And of course, you have individuals like AOC who pushed against it. And there were quite a few jobs that Amazon was going to make. And as a result, Amazon went elsewhere. And of course, Cuomo was upset that these other lawmakers basically drove out Amazon, who would have brought a little bit of extra businesses, of course, that is always welcome within a city. It says, we fear that this tax on high earners will be a money loser for the state, and I wholeheartedly agree. It says, president of Business Group Partnership of New York City, it says, whose members include JP Morgan Chase and Goldman Sachs. Goldman Sachs and these big banks, they're just going to dip. It says they and their companies are setting up operations in Florida and in low tax states, which is going to result in both an economic loss for the city and a fiscal crisis for the state over the next few years. And I've said this before in other videos that New York is dead as a state and as a business. New York is over, and it will be impacted this way for more than a decade, in my opinion. It'll be a long time before New York will ever recover, primarily because of the mindset of the politicians that are basically in power. It goes on to say, so the New York agreement would create a new tax bracket on the proposed plan. Income between 5 million and 25 million would be taxed at 10.3%, and income over 25 million would be taxed at 10.9%. Says the new rates would expire in 2027 under the proposed plan, and I doubt any of these new taxes will be cut over time. These taxes have been one of the largest points of contention between the governor and, of course, the legislature. And during an economic collapse or an economic downfall, the last thing you want to do is raise taxes, because when you raise taxes, it means that businesses can't basically offer more jobs or innovate to move forward. And of course, it also goes on to say, it says leaders of the Assembly, the Senate, and the Assembly each discussed raising nearly $7 billion of revenue, which included proposals to increase income and estate and corporate taxes. The proposal included a 1% surcharge on capital gains income. And of course, it says pied-à-terre, which I believe is individuals who have like a second home, and lifting the estate tax. And so basically, this is just like, what is it, like half of your income is going to go to taxes. Like, who is going to stay here? Who is going to sit here and work and create jobs and have a business and invest, right? Because of changes to capital gains. Why would you come here and do that with half of your income going just to pay for taxes? It even says that they're going to go pay for taxes for immigrants. You have people who are not even citizens of the country, and you're being taxed as a business owner to pay for stuff for these individuals who are not even citizens. You as a citizen, as a business owner, and as a business creator are being taxed to fund individuals who are not even legitimately supposed to be in the country. They're the individuals that are here illegally, regardless of whether you feel sorry for these individuals or you want them to have opportunities. The reality is that you, as a person who is creating businesses, investing in a city, investing in a community, you are then having a huge portion of the money that you earn taken from you via taxation to fund individuals who are coming into the country illegally. Just like you can't even make this stuff up. And of course, it goes on to talk a little bit more about the different proposals, how much money they imagine they're going to earn. And the reality is that this is going to backfire on New York. With that said, there was a little bit something I did want to retouch on, talking about C-19. And it's funny because you have like all of these restrictions, and people always talk about Follow the science. Follow the science. So typically, when you come into the hospital, they do like they have like those scanning guns where they scan you for your temperature. And so I'm doing some orientation at a new place, doing some contracting now. And when you walk in, they scan you to see if you have a fever. And they do the exact same at the gym and then some other places that I've been to. And it's so stupid because you have medical professionals who are scanning your temperature and it's coming back at like 95 degrees. Now, normally your temperature should be like, maybe on the low end, you might be like 96.9, but typically you're going to be above 97. Like about 97.3 is going to be around a normal temperature for a human being. Might be a little bit lower if you're geriatric and you don't have as much body fat. You might be a little bit on the lower end. But 95 is not sustainable with life. And so you have literally other nurses taking temperatures of other medical professionals with an indication that is lower than life expectancy. And we have to sign a sheet of paper that says what was our temperature. And we're literally writing temperatures that are lower than that is sustainable with life on these sheets. And this is their, like, this is what they have everybody doing. And this exact same thing happened at the other hospital that I was at, where they would do the exact same thing, and then they would take your temperature, and I'd be like, what was it? And they'd be like, oh, 92, 95. I'm like, that's not even an accurate temperature. And for a lot, and this is at a hospital. This is at a hospital. And it just goes to show you that you have a lot of these individuals that are just literally going through the motions of pretending to be scientific or medically related. And it's just pointless. There was another thing that they had at the hospital where it was like a thing that you put where you scanned with your hand. And I was like, let's see how accurate this thing is. And I would just put my pinky over the sensor. And they'd be like, you are clear to go. I'd just be like, this is a freaking scam. Between that one and they had another one where you had to do a C19 pass on your phone. So you had to queue up that you didn't have any symptoms and then press accept. And they were like, if you don't do it, you're not going to be able to clock in. I never used that shit. I think it went like 4 months without ever signing into that thing. And it just goes to show you that a lot of these organizations and a lot of this is just for show. It's just for show. You have a lot of people out here that are talking about you need to wear a mask. You got to wear a mask. You have all these people that are telling everybody you got to wear a mask. I see all these healthcare professionals wearing masks, kind of look at you like, well, where's your mask? You don't have a mask on. What's going on? And then the CDC comes out with a little bit of data. And it says 85% of people who tested positive, right? 85% said that they always wore one or often wore one. You had, or is it 70.6% said that when they got interviewed at the hospital, they said they always wore it. And 14.4% said that they often wear their mask. In terms of the people who were like, I never wore it, it's 3.9% said that they never wore a mask. So out of the total of the individuals, a huge portion of the population of individuals who tested positive. And it just goes to show you that you've got a lot of people, and even in positions of medical experts and science, that are just going through the motion. Occasionally you come across information like this that exposes them, but unfortunately it doesn't really make all that much headwinds. Very similarly with all these people who are locked down and forced to stay home. And then what does the study show from the Endocrine Society? The study finds that 80% of people who are diagnosed are vitamin D deficient. And vitamin D is very important when it comes to fighting things off like respiratory infection, along with, of course, with zinc, ambulation. Many of these patients who often come into the hospital are often vitamin D deficient, but you would rarely see patients receiving vitamin D in the hospital or anything that was actually vitamin related. Because if most of these, and I would often ask other like PAs and stuff, I'd be like, there was a study that came out. I was like, do you guys ever check this? And they were like, no. And I was like, but this is according to according to the Endocrine Society. This is what the studies show. Shouldn't we follow the science? And of course, they were telling me, well, we're really only allowed to order whatever the hospital allows us to order. And it just goes to show you that a lot of this is just going through the motions. Many of these individuals aren't unfortunately being treated the way that they should be. Some of these patients aren't really getting quality care. It's very sad to see, but this is unfortunately the reality of the times that we're living in. Anyway, I'm going to leave it right here. I've got some work to do. Hope you guys are having a great day. Thanks for watching. Take care. God bless.